Mikey, Riggs, Tone, Slug, and Daz started out as just 5 kids from Liverpool's toughest streets, selling weed on street corners. But within a decade, they built the Scouse Cartel, one of the UK's most ruthless and secretive drug empires, smuggling cocaine from Spain to the city's back alleys. They stayed invisible to the police, until one careless mistake by a petty thief shattered everything. This is the story of how childhood friends became kings, and how their empire came crashing down. Liverpool, 2003. A city caught between its proud past and uncertain future. The docks are quieter now, the factories mostly gone. In the heart of the inner city, places like Costa, Kensington and Anfield, generations of working-class families are trying to hold on. Among them, a group of 5 teenage boys grow up surrounded by boarded-up shops, broken streetlights, and the distant sounds of sirens. They aren't special by any means, not yet. But they're hungry. Hungry for more than what life seems ready to offer. They call themselves the lads. Mikey, the quiet one. Riggs, the hothead. Tone, the brains. Slug, the one always smiling. And Daz, big and loyal, never far from the rest. At first they just hang out, kicking footballs in alleyways and dodging truancy officers. But soon they find another way to make money, selling weed on the corners. Small bags, low prices, and no questions asked. It's quick cash, in a place where quick cash means everything. It starts with a single contact, an older cousin with a connection to a grower in West Derby. They buy a few ounces, split the product, and hit the streets. At first, it's sloppy. They get chased by police, ripped off by older kids, and nearly robbed in a tower block stairwell. But they learn fast. They watch who to trust, when to talk, and when to shut up. Word spreads about their product, about how they don't short the weight and don't rip off their own. Slowly, they take over corners, then entire estates. Most kids in the area are flashing knockoff designer clothes or stealing phones. But the lads, they keep it low, no showboating, no big parties. Mikey, in particular, makes it a rule, stay under the radar. They hide the money in old biscuit tins and inside broken TV sets. They use school lockers to stash supply and never carry more than they can eat if they get caught. It's not just dealing anymore, it's strategy. By 2005, they've made a name for themselves. Not as a gang, but as something else. Something more organized. Older dealers start asking them to move product. Local kids want in. And yet, they still ride the bus to town and eat at Chippies like everyone else. No one knows how far they'll go, not even them. But behind the laughter and late-night deals, something is shifting. They're no longer just kids playing street games. They're building something quietly, methodically, and Liverpool is watching. Not closely enough. By 2007, the lads had outgrown street corners. Weed money was steady, but it wasn't enough. They were ambitious, restless. The streets of Liverpool could only take them so far, and they were starting to look beyond them. Through a distant cousin of Tone's, an older man who'd moved to the Costa del Sol years ago to escape a few debts. They got wind of something bigger. In Spain, cocaine was everywhere. Cheap, pure, and easy to move if you knew who to talk to. It started with a holiday. Just a few of them at first. Mikey, Riggs, and Tone booking a cheap flight to Malaga under fake names, staying in a rented apartment near Marbella. They weren't there to party. They were there to listen. At a bar owned by an English expat, they met their first contact, a Galician fixer with ties to smugglers, bringing shipments across the Atlantic. At first, the lads didn't talk much. They just watched. They understood quickly that this world was different. The risks were higher, but so were the rewards. The first shipment was small, just under a kilo, vacuum-sealed and hidden inside an old car engine shipped to a garage in Wirral. It was a test, and it worked. No alarms, no heat. The product was stronger than anything else on the streets. They cut it, repackaged it, and sold it through a few trusted runners. It moved fast. Too fast. They doubled the next shipment. then tripled, and just like that, the game changed. The lads reinvested everything. They opened a car wash in Kirkdale, then a barber shop in Wavertree, a cafe near the docks, all cash-heavy businesses that allowed them to clean their growing income. Riggs started taking trips every other month to Spain. Slug handled distribution back home. Daz and Tone managed the transport routes. Mikey stayed behind the scenes, pulling the strings, keeping the operation tight. Unlike other crews, they avoided flash. No flashy cars, no big watches, no social media. They kept things boring on purpose. Their empire grew in silence, hidden in plain sight. They became known for consistency. Always on time, always clean, always one step ahead. Dealers from Manchester, Birmingham, even London started coming to them. The Scouse Cartel was no longer just a whisper. It was a force. Still, they moved carefully. No one outside the inner circle knew where the shipments came from or how they got in. They paid attention to every detail, avoided sloppy mistakes. For now, the system worked. But they also knew one thing. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. By 2010, the Scouse Cartel was running like a machine. Every part of the operation had its place, and every man knew his role. What began as a street hustle had evolved into a tightly controlled network spanning countries and cities. They weren't just moving drugs, they were running a logistics empire. And the secret to their success was simple: invisibility. They adopted a strategy known in criminal circles as the ghost operation. No phones with traceable data, no texts, no social media. Everything was face-to-face or through burners that were destroyed after a single use. Messages were passed using pre-arranged signals, flashing car lights, marked delivery vans, even folded newspapers left at certain benches. If someone wasn't trusted completely, they weren't used. The cartel didn't take chances. Their shipments came in through ports, private couriers and the occasional fishing trawler. Everything was hidden in plain sight, inside engines, behind false walls in vans, buried beneath legitimate goods like ceramics and fresh fruit. Customs officers rarely gave them a second look. Every delivery was carefully timed. Every route mapped and tested. Nothing was left to chance. Back in Liverpool, the product was stored in unassuming places. One of their main stash houses was a disused butcher's shop in Edge Hill. Another was hidden behind the facade of a family-owned bakery. Runners were paid well and trained to disappear if needed. Each only knew one part of the chain. No one saw the full picture, except for the original 5. Mikey had become a shadow. He rarely left his flat in the Baltic Triangle. When he did, he wore hats, glasses and used different cars. He never used the same route twice. He trusted no one outside the core group. Not even blood relatives. His paranoia became part of the business model, and it worked. By this point, police were well aware that something big was happening in the city. They saw the signs: new players taking over old turf, sudden spikes in purity, money flowing where it shouldn't. But every time they tried to trace it, the trail went cold. Informants gave conflicting reports, surveillance picked up nothing useful. No phones, no texts, no names, just silence. The Scouse Cartel didn't look like the typical gang. There were no street tags, no bravado, no public violence. They blended in, dressed normal, drove second-hand cars, and that was the point. While other gangs were busy being seen, the cartel was focused on staying invisible. And in that invisibility, they became untouchable, or so they thought. By 2012, the Scouse Cartel had cemented itself as a dominant force, but success brought visibility, and visibility attracted competition. Word of their clean operation and steady product spread across the Northwest, reaching the ears of rival outfits. One crew in particular, based in Manchester, started making quiet moves into South Liverpool. At first, it was subtle, a few street dealers in unfamiliar postcodes, offering cheaper prices, stirring curiosity. The cartel noticed. They always did. Mikey ordered patience. Watch, don't react, let them show their hand. But Riggs wasn't built for waiting. He saw it as a direct insult. Behind Mikey's back, he arranged a message, a warning. A rival dealer was snatched in broad daylight, driven to the outskirts of the city, and beaten until he couldn't walk. They zip-tied him to a fence near a known gang hotspot and stuffed a note in his mouth that read, "Not here." The act was calculated, but brutal. It sent a message that echoed across the streets. The Manchester crew backed off, almost immediately. No retaliation, no threats, just silence. But something had shifted. The Scouse Cartel had crossed an invisible line. Until now, they had survived through subtlety, through staying low. But this act had placed them into a different category, a gang willing to get violent when challenged. The change didn't go unnoticed. Police began to take the cartel more seriously. Intelligence units started linking assaults and territory disputes to an unnamed group with growing influence. They still lacked hard evidence, but now there was pressure from higher up to find out who was behind the operation. Inside the cartel, the violence sparked quiet tension. Mikey blamed Riggs for escalating things. The others were split. Some believed the message had to be sent. Others worried it was a crack in their careful design. But the truth was, it worked. No one dared encroach on their turf again, at least not directly. As fear spread, their influence deepened. Local gangs folded into their network. Smaller dealers worked under them without even realizing it. Every package that moved through Merseyside now carried their unseen mark, yet the streets stayed mostly calm. There were no turf wars, no drive-bys, only whispers. Whispers about a group who didn't need to be loud to be dangerous. The cartel was entering its most powerful phase. They had territory, product, distribution, and loyalty. But they also had eyes on them now. Not just from rivals, but from law enforcement, and from the streets. And when everyone starts watching, it only takes one wrong move to bring everything crashing down. In early 2015, the Scouse Cartel was operating at full capacity. Shipments were arriving monthly, profits were soaring, and their network stretched from Liverpool to London. But the bigger they grew, the harder it became to control every moving part. And it only took one outsider. One small-time criminal trying to make a name for himself to put a crack in their perfect system. Kieran Malloy was no one important. A petty thief from Norris Green, mostly known for stealing phones and breaking into parked cars. Desperate for cash and with a reputation for taking risks, he prowled wealthier neighborhoods, late at night, looking for anything he could lift. One cold February evening, he broke into an unmarked white Audi parked near the docks. Inside, he found a duffel bag stuffed with tightly packed bundles of cash, £15,000 in notes, and something else, a black notebook filled with initials, dates, numbers, and strange codes. He didn't understand what he had, but he knew it was valuable. Kieran, being Kieran, couldn't keep his mouth shut. He showed the money to his mates. He flashed it around at the pub. And then, in a moment of drunken arrogance, he tried to impress a girl by showing her the notebook. Within a week, Kieran was picked up by police for an unrelated burglary charge. He bragged about his recent score during questioning, thinking it would earn him some rect. Instead, the officers flagged the notebook and passed it on. To the right eyes, the codes meant nothing specific, just letters and numbers. But something about it felt off. Analysts started noticing patterns, recurring sets of initials, dates that aligned with known drug seizures, locations that matched suspected stash houses. For the first time, police had something tangible, a thread to pull. They opened a new case under a confidential file name, Operation Ghostnet. A dedicated unit was assigned to decode the entries, map connections, and follow the money. The deeper they looked, the more they realized they were staring into the dark heart of a sophisticated drug empire. And though no names were written explicitly, the structure hinted at organization, roles, and repeated locations used for meetings and drops. Back in the city, the cartel remained unaware. They dealt with thieves before. A few grand going missing wasn't unusual. They assumed the car had been targeted for its stereo, not its contents. No one even noticed the ledger was gone, but that single mistake, the wrong person opening the wrong car, had set off a chain reaction. One they wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. Operation Ghostnet began quietly. No public raids, no flashing blue lights, just quiet surveillance and long hours spent decoding the information in the black notebook. Over weeks detectives. Just quiet surveillance and long hours spent decoding the information in the black notebook. Over weeks detectives started noticing links between dates and specific times of day, patterns that matched port arrivals, warehouse bookings, and commercial vehicle routes. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to justify deeper digging. The cartel, up to this point, had operated like ghosts. Now for the first time, someone was tracking their shadows. Police began watching a nightclub in Boodle, officially registered under the name of a local businessman with no criminal record. On paper the club was failing, almost no revenue, barely any customers, but the electricity bill was abnormally high. Surveillance cameras were installed across the street. Patterns emerged. Trucks arrived late at night. Men entered through side doors. No music ever played inside. A barber shop in Wavertree was next. It had no website, no booking system, and rarely more than 2 customers a day. Yet it ordered hair products by the pallet, far more than could ever be used. Officers planted trackers on the delivery vans. One ended up parked outside a known stash house 2 hours later. Every move the police made had to be careful. A wrong step could tip off the cartel and shut everything down. So they built slowly, mapping out the infrastructure, observing who came and went. They still didn't know who ran the operation, but they knew it was disciplined. People avoided phones, no social media. Most met in person, and always in different locations. Inside the cartel, suspicions were growing. Mikey began noticing strange delays. 2 small shipments had gone missing, without explanation. A runner reported being followed near Egbert. Someone else said they'd seen a white van parked outside the stash house for 3 nights straight. Mikey ordered everything moved. New meeting points, new cars, new safe houses. But it was already too late. The breakthrough came in May, when Slug was caught on CCTV loading crates into a locked storage unit, registered under a fake name. A routine patrol matched his face to previous surveillance. When police moved in to question him, they found burner phones, £40,000 in cash, and encrypted documents in his flat. He was arrested quietly. No media, no press release. At first, the cartel assumed it was bad luck. Maybe Slug had slipped up. But behind closed doors, Mikey was worried. If Slug talked, everything would unravel. What none of them knew was that Slug was already thinking about his options. And he had plenty. Slug's arrest sent shockwaves through the Scouse Cartel. Within hours, whispers of his capture spread across the city's underground networks. The group had always relied on strict loyalty and silence, but Slug's arrest threatened to break that foundation. Facing a lengthy prison sentence and separated from the others, he was suddenly at a crossroads. The fear of spending years behind bars changed everything. In police custody, Slug quickly realized the gravity of his situation. With a mountain of evidence against him, cash, burner phones, encrypted documents, his chances of walking free were slim. The pressure was immense. Alone in an interrogation room, he faced a choice: stay silent and risk a long sentence, or cooperate and reduce his time. In a moment that would shock everyone connected to the cartel, Slug chose to talk. His decision wasn't easy. He knew the consequences. Betrayal in their world was met with the harshest punishments, but the weight of the evidence, the cold reality of prison, and the chance at a second chance pushed him over the edge. Slug agreed to become a witness for the prosecution. What followed was a carefully negotiated deal. In exchange for his cooperation, Slug received protection and a significantly reduced sentence. But more importantly, he handed over a detailed map of the cartel's operations. He revealed shipment routes from Spain, the locations of stash houses, and names of key members involved in distribution and money laundering. The police suddenly held the blueprint of the Scouse Cartel's entire empire. Armed with Slug's information, law enforcement launched a series of coordinated raids. Over 6 weeks, they hit safe houses in Liverpool, properties in Marbella, and storage units across the UK. Millions of pounds in cash and kilos of cocaine were seized. Front businesses were shut down. The cartel's carefully constructed empire began to crumble before their eyes. Despite the chaos, one name remained elusive: Mikey. The mastermind at the top was nowhere to be found. His whereabouts became the biggest mystery of the investigation. The police intensified their search, but Mikey seemed to vanish without a trace. Inside the cartel, betrayal cut deep. Trust was shattered. Members began turning on one another, paranoid that anyone could be the next to flip. The unity that had once held them together dissolved into fear and suspicion. Slug's decision had turned the tide. The empire that took years to build was unraveling fast. And though many of the cartel's leaders were behind bars, the real question lingered. Would Mikey escape justice, or was his downfall just around the corner? Mikey knew the walls were closing in. Slug's betrayal had shattered the cartel's carefully guarded silence, and police pressure was mounting. But Mikey wasn't just a dealer, he was a strategist, a ghost in the system. For months, he vanished from the streets and social circles, slipping deeper into shadows. His movements became unpredictable. No one outside his closest circle knew where he was or what he was planning. He moved between safe houses, often using disguises and fake identities. His once frequent visits to familiar neighborhoods stopped altogether. Mikey was determined to stay one step ahead of the growing manhunt. He knew the police were hunting not just for evidence, but for him personally. To them, he was the elusive kingpin behind Liverpool's biggest drug empire. Meanwhile, the police followed every lead. They interrogated arrested cartel members, tapped phones, and monitored financial transactions. They traced funds flowing through shell companies, and even used undercover officers posing as smugglers to infiltrate the lower ranks. Yet, despite the pressure, Mikey remained a phantom. One of his smartest moves was leveraging Spain's Costa del Sol network. While local police focused on Liverpool, Mikey had contacts abroad who could move product and cash with relative ease. Using intermediaries, he rerouted shipments through smaller ports and isolated properties. He avoided the big cities, which had become heavily surveilled. This made it harder for authorities to track shipments or link them back to him. But Mikey wasn't invincible. The cracks began showing when a courier traveling between Spain and England was arrested near Gibraltar. He carried encrypted phones and a ledger that, once decoded, pointed directly to one of Mikey's Spanish safe houses. This was a rare mistake, a small slip, but it gave law enforcement their first real chance to close in on Mikey's overseas operations. Back in Liverpool, the cartel's remaining members were fractured and wary. Fear of further betrayals kept them isolated, unable to coordinate. Some quietly exited the drug trade altogether. Others went underground, their loyalty to Mikey wavering. The empire was crumbling piece by piece, and Mikey's grip was loosening. Still, he had one final play. Rumors started circulating among law enforcement that Mikey was planning to disappear for good, leaving the UK entirely. No one knew where or when, but the possibility sparked a race against time. Police launched a covert operation aimed at intercepting him before he vanished forever. Mikey's story had become a cat-and-mouse game, with the stakes higher than ever. The man who built the Scouse Cartel was still out there, elusive as ever. But with every move, his freedom grew more fragile, and his capture closer than anyone expected. In the summer of 2016, the police finally caught a break that would change everything. A key informant within the cartel's Spanish network, a low-level courier, tired of the danger and long prison sentences, offered to cooperate. This man, known only by his code name, provided detailed information about Mikey's movements, safe houses, and contacts. For years, Mikey had relied on trust and secrecy, but this breach was the crack the authorities needed to pry open his world. Working with Spanish and British agencies, the police coordinated a multinational surveillance operation. They monitored phone calls, tracked vehicle movements, and collected intelligence on properties in Marbella and surrounding towns. Over weeks, they pieced together a clear picture of Mikey's routine, his meetings, his supply routes, even his preferred escape plans. The authorities discovered that Mikey was using a network of rented apartments and safe houses under false identities. His primary hideout was a modest villa on the outskirts of Marbella, equipped with security cameras, guard dogs and several escape routes. Despite the luxury, Mikey kept a low profile, avoiding any attention that might draw suspicion. Back in Liverpool, the cartel was barely holding on. The arrests and betrayals had reduced their influence to pockets of the city, and many former members were either in jail or laying low. Rumors spread that Mikey was planning a final move to Latin America, a new base far from the reach of European law enforcement. Then, just as authorities prepared to move in, an unexpected twist occurred. Mikey disappeared. No calls, no messages, no sightings. His villa was found abandoned, but clean. No signs of hurried escape or violence. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The mystery deepened when police discovered a hidden room behind a bookshelf in the villa. Inside there were files, computers, and encrypted drives containing detailed records of the cartel's operations dating back years. But Mikey himself was nowhere to be found. Investigators believed Mikey had anticipated the raid and used the time to slip away through secret tunnels leading to the nearby coastline. From there he might have taken a boat or private yacht to an unknown destination. The hunt intensified. Interpol issued alerts, and border agencies increased checks on flights and boats leaving Spain. Yet, despite their efforts, Mikey remained a ghost. For months, law enforcement followed leads across continents, South America, North Africa, even Southeast Asia. None panned out. Mikey's disappearance became one of the most baffling chapters in British criminal history. The Scouse Cartel, once the most feared drug empire in Liverpool, was leaderless and fractured. Mikey's vanishing act left a void that no one could fill, but the question lingered. Had he truly escaped, or was this another part of his plan, a long game still in motion, waiting for the right moment to strike again? Years passed, and the story of the Scouse Cartel became legend. An epic rise and dramatic fall whispered in Liverpool's streets. Mikey remained missing, his fate unknown. Some believed he had died in hiding, others that he'd built a new empire far away. But the truth was more complicated. In 2020, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. A routine customs inspection at the port of Liverpool uncovered a shipment of luxury cars